Now, I don't normally do spoiler warnings for my spoiler talk videos, movie reviews, whatever you want to call these things. I don't normally do that since I do just put spoilers in the title, but I'm imploring you, before you go watch this movie, if you haven't seen this film already, please go in with as minimal spoilers as you possibly can, just because this movie is so fun and enjoyable if you don't know what's coming. Like, in many ways, if you have no idea what's coming, if you haven't been plugged into the internet for, like, the past year, this movie's gonna blow your mind, because honestly, this movie is so much fun, and I genuinely wish, like, anybody and everybody who watches it really enjoys themselves and loves it, because, I mean, it's just, this movie is great. So we finally have Spider-Man No Way Home, and honestly, I loved this movie. If you guys have watched my channel over the past, like, year, you know that I soured a bit on MCU Spider-Man after Far From Home. I didn't really love the direction they were taking him. Tom Holland's Spider-Man felt too babyish, all that kind of stuff. He just didn't feel like the Spider-Man films from, you know, Sam Raimi and Mark Webb. And honestly, nor did it feel much like Spider-Man Homecoming, because, I mean, yes, Spider-Man Homecoming can be silly and goofy at times, but when the movie is serious, it's serious, and it really worked. But to me, Far From Home just didn't do that. But this film, like, man, did Jon Watts step up his A-game for Spider-Man No Way Home. Like, is this the best Spider-Man film? No. That place still goes to Spider-Man 2. Is this my favorite Spider-Man film? Probably not. I mean, I still love The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Yes, despite its flaws, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is my favorite. But this film is great in its own right. Like, in many ways, this film is something else entirely, and, like, I can't rate it, I can't rank it, and just, honestly, I'm okay with that. I just love the movie we got. I am a fan, and I have been serviced. Like, this week, in terms of comic book related media, I have been eating good. Like, genuinely, this week has been great in terms of comic book media, and just, this movie was, like, the main course and the dessert all at once. Like, God, it was great. This is easily Tom Holland's best Spider-Man film, and honestly has reinvigorated my excitement for Tom Holland's Spider-Man in future installments, just because it's so good. Like, finally, Tom Holland no longer feels like Spider-Boy or Iron Boy Jr. or Iron Man Jr., whatever. In this movie, he finally feels like he's grown up and he's, like, taking things, like, into his own account, and he's doing things personally. He's taking responsibility. I mean, especially by the end of the film. Like, by the end of the film, it sets up a whole new status quo, and I'm like, I'm all for this. I mean, right from the get-go, this film sets a tone, and I really liked it. It was really dark and ominous. Like, the Marvel logos play, and it has Mysterio's speech from the end of Far From Home, you know, his confession, like, oh, Peter Parker, Spider-Man, he's gonna kill everyone. It has that playing, and then we join Peter, like, immediately after the end of Far From Home, and then him and MJ starts, like, swinging around, like, everyone's, like, trying to touch him. There is a funny bit where a guy, like, tries to, like, grab him as he's, like, trying to swing away. That was really funny, but, like, in a good way. Like, it didn't break the tone, but it was funny. And then there's this scene where Peter goes home with MJ, and initially I was unsure about the scene, because basically Aunt May and Happy walk in, and it's MJ undressing Peter out of the suit, and the way the scene is constructed, it's like Peter is panicking because it's like, oh my god, everyone knows who I am. Like, Peter is so preoccupied about not telling May that he's been outed as Spider-Man, like, he's like fully addressing the situation, like, oh my god, yeah, you've just found me and MJ, yeah, we weren't having sex, but, you know, he was, like, fully going into that conversation, and to me, I was kind of like, that feels a bit weird. Like, wouldn't your natural reaction to be like, May, I've just been found out, holy shit, but then, like, it's kind of like he doesn't want to freak out May, and in a way, I kind of like it. I also don't know if, like, on further rewatches, I will dislike that, but as of right now, I didn't mind the scene playing it as Peter sort of distracting himself rather than addressing reality. Like, I think that was a cool way of portraying his denial that he's been found out as Spider-Man. Though I will say, in that regards, I do kind of wish we delved in a bit more into the legal aspects of Spider-Man being outed, because, I mean, the film kind of just sweeps it under the rug. But speaking of the legal aspects, yes, we won! We saved Daredevil! Charlie Cox makes his MCU debut as Matt Murdock. He makes his return to the big screen, and honestly, I loved it. I think the amount of times I went yes to myself in this movie was like 4 or 5 times. Like, genuinely, I was so happy. Like, seeing Charlie Cox back again, the dude has not missed a beat. Like, how long has it been since Daredevil's been cancelled? Like, 2017, 2018? But, like, man, this dude just did not miss a beat. I genuinely love the moment where Matt's talking to Happy, May, and Peter, and he's just like, you're gonna need a great lawyer. And then, like, someone just throws, like, a brick through the window, and then Matt catches it, and they're like, how did you do that? And he was just like, I'm a really great lawyer. Like, That was so good. Charlie Cox is fucking perfection. I am going to mention some spoilers from Hawkeye episode 5, so if you don't want to hear it, skip to the timestamp here. The return of Vincent D'Onofrio as Wilson Fisk in Hawkeye is just as great news as seeing Charlie Cox in No Way Home. And I mean, I cannot wait for Daredevil's MCU debut, whether it's on Disney Plus or his own film. I can't wait to see Daredevil, to see Charlie Cox, to see Vincent D'Onofrio, Wilson Fisk versus Matt Murdock on the screen again. Yeah, we won. We saved Daredevil. Fuck yes! But yeah, getting onto the film story itself, I honestly really liked it. It's actually quite simple when you think about it. And, like, obviously from the trailers we know that Peter goes to Doctor Strange and asks him to make a spell to make everybody forget, etc, etc. But I think one of the cool things is that Peter doesn't just go to Doctor Strange to ask him to reverse the spell for his own selfish purposes. He goes because he wants to get MJ and Ned into MIT because them being associated with the murderer Spider-Man has, like, put them out of the running for college applications. They keep getting rejected. And I thought that little character moment was really nice. Like, Peter isn't doing this for his own personal gain. He's doing it for his friends. Like, Peter tracks down the MIT admissions officer, and then, like, they're on the highway, and then this is when the movie just kicks up a gear. We get the re-entrance of Alfred Molina's Dr. Octopus, and, like, it was glorious. Michael Giacchino brings back Danny Elfman's Doc Ock theme, you know, the dun, dun, da, da. You know, he comes back into the scene and he's all just like, hello, Peter. And just honestly, the fight scene was so great. And, like, Alfred Molina's Dr. Octopus was spectacular in this movie. Like, it seems like, again, he didn't miss a beat from portraying this character back in 2004. He just feels like that character, again, just brought back to present day. I mean, granted, he doesn't look like how he did in 2004, like, at all. Like, his hairstyle is also completely different. But, in terms of the way Alfred Molina portrayed the character, he was pitch perfect. But like I said, the action scene between Spider-Man and Doc Ock is really fun, and I liked the Iron Spider in this scene. Like, I really liked it how the nanotech from the Iron Spider suit gets put into the arms, and then Peter can just control Doc Ock's arms. Like, I thought that was really cool. And then the scene escalates even further because you see the pumpkin bomb, and then, honestly, I got so giddy because, like, you hear the of Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin. Like, you see him on the glider with the mask, and I was like, yes, give me Dafoe. But then the film anticlimactically just, like, teleports Peter away, and I was like, oh, no, give me Dafoe, like, no. But honestly, just even that little tease of what's to come, like, I think I was doing the goblin cackle to myself in the cinema. I was just like, So the main conflict of the film is basically Peter has to get all the villains from the previous Spider-Man films, you know, the multiverse of villains. He has to get them, bring them back to the Sanctum Sanctorum so then Doctor Strange can send them back to their specific moments. But a thing that I thought was very much in line with the character of Spider-Man is that once he finds out that when him and Doctor Strange send them back, the villains will just die because they died fighting Spider-Man, he's just like, no, I'm not gonna do that. He fights Doctor Strange in a pretty cool action sequence. He then traps Doctor Strange in the mirror dimension, and then he gets the villains to help him rehabilitate them, so when he sends them back, they won't die fighting Spider-Man, they'll just be back rehabilitated. Like, to me, that sense of empathy, that sense of kindness and generosity, that's very much a Peter Parker Spider-Man thing to do. And a thing that I thought was really cool was, like, bringing Willem Dafoe back to be sort of like a mentor figure to Peter Parker, like an assistant. Like, seeing Dafoe not just as the Green Goblin, but as Norman Osborn was great. Like, in many ways, he felt like the scientist Norman Osborn from the early Stan Lee era. Like, yes, in the comic books, Norman Osborn isn't essentially the greatest person. Like, yes, he does some pretty bad things and he's not the greatest father. But in terms of him being a scientist, he's a great scientist. And seeing him working with Tom Holland Spider-Man, that was genuinely great stuff. And then the Goblin persona takes over, and just seeing that was so classic Green Goblin. Like, I've missed seeing the Green Goblin being done properly in a Spider-Man film. Like, the Harry Osborn Green Goblin arc was butchered in Spider-Man 3, and whilst I think Dane DeHaan's Green Goblin is fine for The Amazing Spider-Man 2, he just isn't, like, the Green Goblin. And so seeing Norman Osborn once again don the Green Goblin mask, well, technically he breaks that, and I won't lie, I was disappointed when he broke the mask because, like, unpopular opinion, I really like the Willem Dafoe Green Goblin mask. Like, yes, people call it the dumb Power Rangers mask. I don't care. I like it. I think it looks cool, and I thought it looked cool in this movie, but he breaks it. But yeah, I just miss seeing Norman Osborn as the Green Goblin, and seeing him in this movie, not just being, you know, Norman Osborn the scientist, but also seeing that turn, that villainous turn, the Goblin turn, like the Goblin persona taking over. That was amazing. And honestly, the fight between Tom Holland and Willem Dafoe was fucking awesome. Like, I mean, they weren't just like throwing hands. Dafoe was dominating him. He was like throwing him through walls and then throwing him down sets of floors. Like, it was incredible. And then Aunt May dies, and like, honestly, that was so good. It was a really emotional scene, actually. Like, I liked how May tried to play it off like, yeah, I'm fine, I'm fine. And then, like, she slowly starts dying, and like, you see the blood coming out because she got like whacked by the glider. And then Peter's just like in denial, just being like, May, you're gonna be fine. Someone call an ambulance, someone call an ambulance. It was really great stuff. And then, of course, you have Aunt May giving Peter the "with great power comes great responsibility" line, and just, to me, it's weird, like, the MCU Aunt May is now Peter's Uncle Ben, if that makes sense, and, like, it's weird, and I will bring up Uncle Ben later on, because, I mean, if I have one problem with this film, it is Uncle Ben, but we'll get there. But, I mean, Aunt May dying, like, finally there was some stakes, there was some emotion, like, where has this been for the past 2 Spider-Man films? Like, finally! I mean, the bit where Happy is, like, distracting the SWAT team, like, he's getting arrested, and he's like, Peter! Get out of there, run! It was so good. Like, finally, there was actually some stakes and consequences. It was so good. And then after that scene, the movie takes itself up to another level. Tobey and Andrew enter the scene, and it is fucking incredible. I mean, I got chills. There was cheering. There was crying. Seeing Andrew Garfield again, my favorite Spider-Man, my favorite, like, working actor today. Oh my god, it was wonderful. And I love the way Jon Watts decided to do that scene. Like, I loved having, like, Ned use the sling ring, which in many ways I thought was really funny, because it's kind of like, oh my god, Ned's a magician. Imagine if we found out that, like, Ned is related to Wong in some way. Like, I don't know, that just seemed funny to me. But yeah, Ned used the sling ring, and then you see, like, a Spider-Man in an alleyway, and immediately I was like, that's Andrew. Just because, like, you can see the big white eyes from the Amazing Spider-Man 2 suit, and then, like, he starts walking closer and closer to the sling ring portal, and then he walks through, and you see him get lankier, and you're like, oh my god, it's Andrew Garfield! Honestly, it was perfect. Like, him talking to Ned and MJ, and their banter was so great. And they're like, hey, crawl on the wall, and he's like, I'm not gonna do that. And they just, like, stick to the wall, and he's like, okay, and he sticks to the wall. And they're like, can you crawl? And he's like, no. And then, like, Ned's mum or aunt asks him to, like, you know, take the cobwebs off the wall, and, like, he does that. It's so great. Like, if the one thing I wanted from Spider-Man No Way Home was for them to give justice to Andrew Garfield, they did. Like, to me, Spider-Man No Way Home was justice for Andrew Garfield. Like, just seeing him back again and seeing him being treated with kind of love and warmth was so great. I will say, the music they play in the scene is the Amazing Spider-Man theme, you know, the da-na-na-na, na-na-na-na-na-na, and I'm like, that's cool, that's great, I love the Amazing Spider-Man theme, but I kind of personally wish they used Hans Zimmer's Amazing Spider-Man 2 theme. Just, I don't know, I love the I love that theme more, but for the context of the scene, the Amazing Spider-Man theme just, it works in the scene. So, I mean, I will complain that it wasn't the Amazing Spider-Man 2 theme, but in context of the scene, like, the music worked. But honestly, I mean, the way they handled Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man to me was great. Like, he was both comedic and he was tragic. But to me, Spider-Man No Way Home just felt like it was justice for Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, because to me, he's my favorite Spider-Man. He's been my favorite Spider-Man since The Amazing Spider-Man came out, and just, I loved him, and I've always disliked how, you know, people are allowed to have their preferences, but I've always disliked how he's always been put down at the bottom of most people's lists, but just, he was great in this movie. And one of the cool elements they brought up about Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man was how, like, after Gwen died, he went down a darker path, he stopped pulling his punches, and he was ultimately just angry and filled with revenge and anger, and it was just, that was great, and because of that, I need The Amazing Spider-Man 3. Like, in all these years of me theorizing what Amazing Spider-Man 3 would have been like, or how I personally would have done Amazing Spider-Man 3, that's the route I would have gone down. I would have turned, you know, Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker down a dark path. It would have been, you know, sadder seeing him go down, like, further into darkness, and, you know, finding a way to pull himself back out. Like, seeing that and hearing that from Andrew Spider-Man, you know, basically confirming what would have happened to his character down the line. I need to see that in film form. Like, that would just be amazing. And speaking of amazing, when Tobey Maguire enters the scene too, and him and Andrew are just, like, bouncing off one another, and they're also interacting with, like, Ned and MJ, like, it was so great. And just seeing Tobey, the OG, the original gangster, he was just so great. Like, he looks different to how he does in Spider-Man 2 and 3. Like, he looks much older, but he also looks healthy and happy, and just, honestly, that's so great. Like, we don't get to see Tobey Maguire in many films nowadays, and seeing him in No Way Home as, you know, Tobey Maguire, Peter Parker, it was great. And for me, the bond between the three Spider-Men was honestly beautiful. I loved how they all kind of just felt like brothers in a weird way, even though they're all technically the same person, just from different universes. And honestly, I'm so thankful that this was the case, because my main fear for going into Spider-Man No Way Home was that Tom Holland Spider-Man was going to get sidelined, and that he wouldn't feel like he was on the same level compared to Tobey and Andrew. And in many ways, Tobey and Andrew felt like supporting roles, which was great. Like, they felt like mentors to him. Like, the scene where they just start consoling Tom after Aunt May's death, and they're like, yeah, we know what you're going through, you know, Uncle Ben in my universe, and then Uncle Ben in my universe. That was great stuff. And, like, honestly, it really just hit me. Like, when Tom's just like, oh yeah, with great power comes great responsibility, and Tobey's just like, yeah, that's what my Uncle Ben said. And Peter's just like, oh, that's cool. And then, like, Andrew Spider-Man's just like, hey, yeah, my Uncle Ben said it too. I don't know if that's just because I'm fanboying over Andrew Garfield and because he's my favorite, but hearing him say, yeah, Uncle Ben, and the way he delivered those lines, I was like, oh my god, that's how Andrew would say those lines. Like, that is just so cool. Just, I loved it. I genuinely loved that scene. And in many ways, that scene actually fixes my biggest problem with Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, which is, in the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man film, I love the origin. My biggest problem was that he lets the robber die. But this film manages to fix that and turn it into more of a character point. Because Tobey's just like, yeah, when that happened, I wanted to feel the revenge of seeing my uncle's killer die. But over the years, it didn't make me feel any better. I was like, oh, they fixed it. They actually made it a character beat, and it worked. But, big problem with this, and this is kind of my main problem with the entire film, is, where the fuck is MCU Uncle Ben? Like, at the end of the film, when Peter goes to Aunt May's grave, she's not buried next to Ben Parker, it's just May Parker. Like, what the fuck? Where is MCU Uncle Ben? Does he just not exist? Like, that doesn't make any sense, because all of the references we've gotten in the past, like, huh? Like, in Civil War, Peter's speech to Tony is heavily based on the Uncle Ben philosophy. In Spider-Man Homecoming, there's a line where he's like, I can't tell May I'm Spider-Man because if she finds out, she's gonna freak out, and I can't do that to her, not after everything that's happened. Obviously implying Uncle Ben. And then, of course, we get the initials of Uncle Ben's briefcase in Spider-Man Far From Home, so where the fuck is Uncle Ben in the MCU? God, that did annoy me. That really did piss me off. But it was a minor piss off, don't get me wrong, I love the movie, but yeah, that is my biggest gripe of the entire film. But honestly, I kind of just don't care. Just seeing Tobey, Tom, and Andrew all together on the big screen was great. The scene where they're in the Midtown Science Lab, and they're trying to work out the cure for Goblin, and for Lizard, and for Sandman, like, it's great. And seeing them all interact and bounce off one another, and like Tom and Andrew like comparing, oh yeah, both got web shooters. Tobey, how do you shoot your webs? And they're like they bring up the organic webbing. Like, that's just, it's so cool. I love their dynamic. And like the preamble before the final battle where Tobey and Andrew are like talking, and then like Andrew's just like, wait, but you've got like the web blood, right? Or whatever. And then like he cracks Tobey's back. Like, that was great. The Tobey back reference was great, because obviously, you know, in Spider-Man 2, Tobey hurt his back, and there was question as to whether he was going to return for the sequel. And then obviously in Spider-Man 2, there's the joke of, ow, my back! My back! And just seeing that scene was like great. Like Andrew cracking his back, that was just great. I won't lie, there are moments that I do feel like Andrew Garfield was getting a bit too into the improvisation, because like there are moments where he's just like, guys, I love you. And they're like mid-fight, and they're like, okay, cool, why did you tell us that? And I'm like, yeah, Andrew, why did you tell us that? Like, in many ways, they tried to make him sappy like Peter B. Parker in a way, and I mean, that kind of worked. Like, it was a little weird, but I didn't mind it. It was fun in the end. Like, it's crazy, just like, in many ways, I kind of just want a full Into the Spider-Verse style film with just Tom, Tobey, and Andrew just, like, vibing across the Spider-Verse. I just think that would be so fun. But honestly, the final fight was so cool. Like, seeing the three of them all work together, seeing the three shot of them all, like, landing, doing the classic Spider-Man poses, it's great. And the moment where Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man catches MJ was genuinely just, it was so great. I loved Andrew Garfield's performance in that scene. Like, he's looking down at MJ, and the character himself is getting, you know, he's tearing up. He's just like, oh my god, I finally got a chance to redeem myself for Gwen. Like, to me, that was beautiful, and I loved the way Andrew Garfield played that scene. Like, that was fantastic. And then, like, of course, in the final fight, you've got, like, Sandman, Lizard, Electro. And the thing that I found funny was how, like, after they started curing the characters, you could tell that Sandman and the Lizard, and I will say, I liked them in the film. I will say, Sandman doesn't get that much to do. And an interesting thing, and you can tell how much I've watched the old Spider-Man films, just because I could tell that when they reverted Sandman and Lizard back to their normal forms, you could tell that that was just reused footage from Spider-Man 3 and The Amazing Spider-Man. Like, for Sandman, it's the footage for where he lands in the water in the subway fight and, like, the mud's, like, you know, dripping off him. They reversed that footage to make it seem like, oh, he's, being, you know, fixed. And then, obviously, with Dr. Connors, they just used footage at the end of the first Amazing Spider-Man. I think that was mainly due to COVID reasons, probably. But, I mean, still, it's really good. Like, I thought that was really creative. It's kind of like how in Zack Snyder's Justice League, Zack Snyder got old footage of Henry Cavill doing, you know, the Zod, you know, crying scene at the end of Man of Steel and repurposing it in the Darkseid scene in the Snyder Cut. But honestly, the emotional stakes were there for me in that final fight. When Peter finds the Goblin and he just goes ham on him, beats the living shit out of him, and then when he gets the glider and he's about to impale him and then Tobey stops him, I loved that. That was genuinely an amazing moment. And I won't lie, I almost freaked out. Like, I thought Tobey was gonna die because he gets stabbed and I'm like, no, Tobey, don't fucking kill Tobey. No, 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 don't, no, no, no. I mean, he ultimately ends up not dying. So in many ways, it's kind of like, what was the point in doing that then? But still, I don't care. Just, that was genuinely a great moment. It was so good. And just, I loved the way the film's climax happened. Like, Peter goes to Doctor Strange and he's like, hey, Doc, like, it's fine. Let everybody forget. I don't care because, you know, it's this, you know, sequence of events, everyone finding out is hurting everybody. So just, it's best if no one knows. I also love Doc Ock returning for the final fight because obviously in the scenes prior, he'd been, you know, fixed. They fixed the inhibitor chip and so he was back in control of the arms. And yes, I mean, like, again, Alfred Molina's Doc Ock isn't comic book Doc Ock. He's not, you know, naturally evil. And so just seeing him reunite with Tobey is like, Peter Parker, how are you? Wow, you look all grown up. And he's like, how are things these days? And like, how are you doing? And genuinely, I love this reference. Like, when Tobey goes, you know, trying to do better. That's literally what he says to him in Spider-Man 2. I fucking love that. Again, to reiterate, Spider-Man No Way Home should not have worked as a film. It shouldn't. It should have come off as really cringy and corny and forced and messy. But the way Jon Watts has managed to, you know, juggle all that and put it into the film and make it, you know, work, it's fucking phenomenal. Like, it's genuinely a miracle. In no way, shape, or form should having Willem Dafoe come back as Norman Osborn and have him say, unironically, you know, I'm something of a scientist myself, that shouldn't work. Genuinely, that should feel forced and cringy because it's like, oh, you're just doing the memes. But it fucking worked. And I'm like, I don't know how, but it did. But I mean, a massive round of applause to Jon Watts. Like, he nailed it. I mean, yes, the action isn't as great as the Sam Raimi or Amazing Spider-Man films. Like, again, Jon Watts does struggle with that in that department. And that's mainly because most of it's all done on the computer. Like, barely any of it's done practically. But I mean, like, I just don't care. Overall, this was an amazing film. And honestly, I can't wait to see more of Tom Holland's Spider-Man. I can't wait for the college trilogy. You know, him living alone now. No Aunt May, no Uncle Ben, no Ned, no MJ. He doesn't have any friends. He has to juggle his life as Peter and Spider-Man again. I really hope the next director who steps up to the plate brings us that dramatic tone that we got in Spider-Man 2 and even in the Amazing Spider-Man films. Because, I mean, yes, despite the sort of goofier tone Amazing Spider-Man 2 takes, those two Amazing Spider-Man films, in a way, tonally felt like Spider-Man to me. They were character dramas. They tried to take themselves more seriously. At the end of the day, the core dynamic between Peter and Gwen was the soul of the film, and I want that again in Spider-Man films. And I hope whoever takes the helm of the next Spider-Man trilogy does that. Also, Tom's new red and blue Spider-Man suit at the end looks good, I think. Like, I can't tell because we barely get a good shot of it in the film. It's like the final swing is just him swinging, but it's like so close. I'm like, I can't see what this looks like. Give me the full hero shot. I mean, no black bands, no Stark tech. It's just Peter making a cloth suit, going out, solving and fighting crime. Like, I'm so down for a trilogy of this Spider-Man being, you know, comic book Spider-Man. And also, thank God that they got rid of Tom Hardy's Venom in that post-credit scene, because I mean, I won't lie, I didn't like Tom Hardy's Venom in Venom Let There Be Carnage. I didn't mind him in the first Venom film, but in Venom 2, he sucked, because Venom wasn't scary in that movie. He was just dumb and goofy, and I'm like, I don't want this Venom anywhere near a Spider-Man because, like, the dynamic is already ruined. But no, in many ways, that first post-credit scene was kind of like Kevin Feige going, yeah, no, we don't want your stinky Venom. You could just take him back to the Sonyverse. But we do want the Venom symbiote, so just leave a little bit of the black goo on the table. Yeah, we want that. We want that for the next trilogy. And I mean, if we're doing the Venom saga for the next trilogy in, you know, Tom Holland's next trilogy, that's gonna be fucking cool, and I really hope they nail it this time. Like, I'm genuinely happy now that we now have the status quo that nobody knows Peter Parker is Spider-Man in the MCU, so it's kind of like, we get to go back to basics with Spider-Man, we get to do all the sneaking around, all that fun stuff, we get to do Peter cancelling plans because he's got responsibilities and he can't tell people. Like, I'm so happy we just get that again. Also, the second post-credit scene is a Doctor Strange 2 trailer, and like, it's the very, very end of the film, but it looks great. Like, I'm genuinely happy that we're getting to see Sam Raimi return to filmmaking, and not only that, he's helming a Doctor Strange film. Like, it's gonna be great. Also, they bring in that dark version of Doctor Strange from What If, and I actually need to sit down and watch that episode because I haven't watched What If, but I've heard that that's one of the best episodes of that show, so I'm excited to see that happen in Doctor Strange 2. But overall, I loved Spider-Man No Way Home. In many ways, it was a miracle. This movie should not have worked, this should have sucked balls, it should have just been nostalgia bait and a cheap cash grab, but no, Jon Watts really added in some heart and soul, and seeing all of them together on screen was just so wonderful, and there is such a bright future ahead now for Spider-Man that I really hope isn't squandered. Like, whoever takes up the director's chair for the next Spider-Man films, they need to do a great job, because, I mean, I can't, like, fall out of love with Tom Holland Spider-Man again. Like, if that would happen, that would genuinely suck. I don't want that to happen. I want to see Tom Holland play Spider-Man now for years to come, because I think Tom Holland is a good Peter Parker and a good Spider-Man. He just needs great material to elevate him to that level, and he's slowly getting there now. Far From Home is a massive step in the right direction. Now, I just need that character drama-filled film with, you know, Tom Spider-Man, you know, struggling in his day-to-day life with the crime fighting. I just need that. But the real question is, what did you guys think of Spider-Man No Way Home? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, follow me on social media, all that good stuff. It's all down in the description. And until we meet again, see you guys next time.